Josh, welcome to the I Don't Think We Talk Enough About podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
And for people listening, you're on Instagram as Anxiety Josh.
Yeah.
So there's no surprise that today is all about anxiety. And I know from having read your latest book, And How Does That Make You Feel, you're very honest about your own journey with anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. I think someone as a male psychotherapist whose passion is psychotherapy, therapy, getting people to talk, and also the world of anxiety and anxiety disorders, which I think is really important to get the right psychoeducation out there. I used to be a teacher and I miss it. It was good, but I wanted to combine teaching and the love for psychology. So I studied to be a psychotherapist, and that's what I do. It's what I've done in the book, and it's what I do every day in my practice or when I'm prancing around on social media.
No, it's fantastic. And as I was reading it, the book, Josh, it's very raw, but it's also very funny. I don't really know how you combine the two. I was at stages laughing out loud, and then in stages tears streaming, and you hold both emotions so beautifully in the book. And I wanted to acknowledge here that you've had a journey.
I used to struggle. My first ever anxious episode, when I had a nervous breakdown, for the want of a better term, in my young 20s, was when I was at work and going through a very stressful time. And I remember this is my first foray into anxiety disorder territory. I was making a cup of tea at work, and I dropped the teaspoon and made a slight clanging noise. And I looked up and I experienced dissociation for the first time. A symptom called derealization and depersonalization, where I didn't feel like I was in the room. I didn't feel like I was in my body. People's faces looked like clay. I just thought, you've finally done it, Josh. You've broken your mind. And I remember that was the moment it changed, and I went home and didn't leave the house for a long time. And I'm quite an extroverted person as well, so it was very difficult for me, because it all contrasted with being quite a confident person to feeling utter terror. I rang the ambulance a few times because I was having what I now know as panic attacks, but I had no idea. I thought a panic attack was what you see on TV. But then slowly but surely, I started to learn about it properly, what was happening, and not fearing it anymore. It's interesting, like a lot of people ask, like, how do you overcome or get past anxiety? I think the question's wrong. I was asking that all the time. I like to use the analogy of sitting in a busy restaurant. Some of the best restaurants I've been to have been loud and busy. And I use this analogy where, well, how do I turn off the noise in the restaurant? Now, when I was struggling really bad with anxiety, I go in the restaurant and worry because I couldn't turn down the noise, the clanging of plates, the chatter, the lounge music, whatever, people eating, cutlery. But have you noticed that when you go to a restaurant, you go out for something to eat with a loved one or a friend, your brain, if it's engaged, will actually shut all of that out, and you'll start just focusing on what your friend's saying. You're engaged in the conversation. Suddenly everything doesn't matter that the noise is there.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And your journey too. I could sit and listen all day. I forgot that I had to ask questions. There's a couple of things you've said that I'd like to come back to, because they were questions from the audience too. One was around the panic attacks and the anxiety attacks. I also sadly have experience of panic attacks. My journey.
They're fun, aren't they?
Yeah. Ambulance calling. Yeah. All of that. I know. And it's, and I've not shared that before. So that is a little bit of self-disclosure for me, but they are terrifying. And when someone called the ambulance for me, the paramedic mentioned that it's one of their most popular call-outs is for a panic attack, because people do think they're dying.
Yeah, the experience is terrifying. It's a panic attack when, it's a 3-part Woolworths pick and mix. The first one you've got is scary what-if thoughts. And it usually revolves around, what if I collapse? What if I'm going crazy? What if I die? What if I have a heart attack? What if I humiliate myself? So they're the what if thoughts.
Yeah.
The second part of the Woolworths pick and mix is your strawberry laces or licorice, if you're that way inclined, is the physical symptoms, including dissociation. So a lot of people who have panic attacks suddenly don't feel here. And they have this racing heart, air hunger, you can't quite catch a full breath.
Yeah.
I used to just bloat randomly, feel dizzy, lightheaded, muscle tension, chest tightness. You might sweat, you might feel the need to go to the toilet. That's only the second part of the Woolworths pick and mix. And the third one's feelings. So some people freeze and dissociate. Most common feeling with panic attacks is terror. Doom is a one. You know, I just feel like this doom feeling, and it's even scarier when you're in a situation that isn't dangerous. It feels more scary because you're like, you know, I'm in Asda trying to get bread. You know, why do I feel like there's a gun to my head?
I know.
Yeah. And each person's panic attack is different. And I say, well, let's formulate it and let's guess it and make it more predictable so we fear them less.
I think it's really important that we actually define what is anxiety.
Ooh, what is anxiety? It's your brain's threat response. It's the amygdala in your brain, a cashew-shaped part of your brain, somewhere knocking about here, I think. It's the oldest, fastest, dumbest part of you that has been primarily responsible for humans hitting the top of the food chain. Because, I mean, if you look at humans, we're not, compared to other large mammals, we're not very good at fighting or, you know, I'll take on a bear, you know, a few stellars. But in general, we're not very good at fighting or running. And so what we do have is a threat response, which is so advantageous for human evolution and for us for where we are now. The threat response is to make you doubt. Now, if you are anxious, you'll be very familiar with doubt. It's often frowned upon or seen as weakness and things like that, which makes me laugh because the doubt response is magnificent. It's made us get to where we are now. My great auntie and uncle walking across the Serengeti, you know, one of them says to the other, I feel a bit anxious, like something bad's going to happen. The doubt response kicks in. You know, maybe it's my uncle. My auntie says, oh, you're being an overthinker again. Stop worrying. Then my uncle says, no, I really think we might be in danger. Just a doubt response kicking in. And so as a result of that, my uncle looks up, exactly like a meerkat. We stole this from the meerkat, and scans the horizon. And lo and behold, because he was worried and started to focus on potential threats, he sees a herd of lions a mile away that they'd have just walked into if he wasn't worried. Now it's advantage humans because you can walk around the lions, you know, you can wait until they fall asleep, or, you know, you can have a Lion King themed barbecue later on. So it's up to you, and all because of that doubt response. It is never evolved, but it's really annoying if you're sat at the computer in the office, out with your mates, on public transport, because it makes you doubt your safety, and you try to make sense of that doubt, and that's the threat response. What a threat is subjective to the individual. So some people, particularly with panic attacks, might see panic attacks themselves as threat. Some people may care what people think, so judgment, rejection as threat. Particularly if you've had, you know, a rough upbringing or been in an abusive relationship, your amygdala will remember those things. Phobias are a threat. I don't like spiders, and you won't see me picking one up anytime soon.
Oh, join the club.
Yeah, not a chance. Yeah.
No, and even with all of my training and the mind-body connection, I will try so hard. Still, just can't go there.
Well, we do, if we needed to for our own life, we probably would. But I'm quite happy to go to my deathbed not doing that.
Not sure.
Yeah.
That one I just can't. I really struggle.
Yeah, it's just whatever the threat is. There'll be people listening now with generalized anxiety disorder where sometimes we're anxious first, and then the brain tries to give us reasons as to why we're anxious. It goes, well, why are you so anxious? So it'll just give you a plethora of what ifs. What if it's that? What if it's that? What if that person hates you?
Talking about that stress jug again, how do you limit what's in that stress jug? How do you work with that with your clients?
The first port of call is to identify what's in it.
Okay.
A lot of people don't even know what's in it, particularly if you're an emotionally conservative person. Talk about emotional conservatism in the book, and it's when we revere the repressing and hiding of emotions, but even on a personal inwards level, where that isn't a problem, I'm going to repress it. And that goes in your stress jug and can stay there for a long time. I'm someone who grew up in Lancashire playing rugby league, boxing, conventionally, boy things. And part of that was, you don't show weakness, you don't ever cry at school because you got punched. It's like, I'm already crying. Like, why do I need to be punched? You never show that, and that gets conditioned in your brain. And that itself was in my stress jug. Like things you introject about what it is to be a man or a woman or wherever from your own life.
I know.
Other things in my stress jug were like grief, self-esteem issues, stress, breakups, everyday stress.
And that jug's just getting fuller and fuller. And as you say, almost unconscious pressures. You're not actually aware of them, are you, in your day-to-day existence? But it's all sitting within your mind and your body the whole time.
Absolutely, yeah. When I get clients that come to me and they're like, I've no reason to be anxious. I don't understand why I'm having panic attacks. And then I get out my whiteboard and pen.
I need to get a whiteboard. I keep saying this at the moment.
I've got one on wheels. It's amazing.
I'm whiteboard jealous. I really am.
Clients are like, you're infantilizing me. I was like, damn right. Okay. But we write down their worries. Like, tell me what you're worrying about this week. Now tell me this. And as the session goes on, they're like, whoa, yeah, I've actually got quite a lot, haven't I? But they don't realize it present day, moment to moment. I certainly didn't either. Same with panic attacks. Everyone's like, panic attacks come from nowhere. And they're like, let's look at what's happened in the last few weeks.
That came up a lot about the anxiety in the morning. So do you just want to share why?
No stranger to morning anxiety. You wake up, you open your eyes and you feel like, oh my, this is the last day the earth exists. You're this constant doom. Well, everyone gets cortisol in the morning. That's why it's what wakes us up. That's why you feel groggy and sometimes anxious. If you're susceptible to anxiety, highly stressed or struggling with anxiety disorder, you'll be susceptible to more cortisol in the morning, so you wake up probably feeling very anxious. It's very normal. It's okay. Don't encourage lying there ruminating, trying to think out your way out of that feeling. Get up. Don't let it be, don't see your problems through the lens of all that cortisol, because you're only going to be drawn to the disaster. And then throughout the day, the kind of levels drop a bit. But in the mornings, that's where we get the most of it. When we have high levels of anxiety and panic, you get a lot of cortisol and adrenaline. If you struggle with PMDD, if you're going through the perimenopause or the menopause, you'll have even more cortisol.
That's really interesting, because I listened to something you did something on that the other day, didn't you, on your Instagram about that?
Mansplaining
You did.
The menopause.
But that was another question that came up that I hadn't actually brought today. But do share a little bit more about that, because that is something that's not being talked about enough, the anxiety around that comes in with perimenopause.
Yeah, people going through that, you're going to go through a rough time. I don't envy it, and you've got to go through quite a lot. But like during times, if you struggle with PMDD and perimenopause and menopause, your estrogen drops during your cycle, and what's the other chemical now? Estrogen and
Progesterone.
Progesterone, that's the one. when they plummet, the body compensates by, we'll have some cortisol. And it's like, but if you're already anxious, it's like, I've had enough. And so if you get anxious, particularly around if it's that time of the month, or you're going through perimenopause or menopause, you're not doing anything wrong. You're going to get the symptoms that go with that. The hot flushes, the heart palpitations, the lack of sleep, that doom feeling, the sweating, the nausea, things like that. And because the body doing what it's doing, it doesn't make you any weaker or less able. And I admire you for going through it.
I think you started to bring in some of the symptoms there of anxiety in general as well, which are obviously impacted a lot in perimenopause. But lots of people ask the questions around what symptoms are we seeing in anxiety? What symptoms are you seeing the most of? What are the unusual symptoms?
There's a lot of symptoms. I'll try and reel them off.
Yeah.
From the most common, one of the most common ones I hear is that dissociation, or DPDR, which is when we don't feel like our usual selves, when we feel detached from who we are.
It's a very popular one, isn't it? And that can be a really frightening symptom for people who don't realise it's linked to anxiety.
Yeah, it's definitely. I call it a stress symptom. I still get it now, but I'm not bothered by it. Didn't know what it was. Oh, it was frightening.
Yes.
I felt like I was in the Matrix, and I didn't understand I just didn't feel like I was in my body. And then I got in the cycle, so then I worried about it.
Yeah.
But it was the stress that was keeping it there. So I'm just in this cycle of worrying about it. No one explained to me what it was. And then it just maintained itself. So I was like, oh, I've broken my brain finally. But actually, I was just in a dissociative state because I was in the anxious cycle.
Of course you were.
Yeah, that's one. Heart palpitations, skipped heartbeats. That's a popular one. And if you're anxious, your posture's probably poor, so you'll get chest pains.
Yes, of course.
If you have heart palpitations and chest pains, that's fun because you misinterpret what's going on. Two completely separate symptoms, but your brain just goes, chest pain, heart palpitating, I'm off.
And you can then see how quickly that fear response escalates and all the other symptoms come in. The other one is, and you mentioned earlier, intrusive thoughts.
Oh, yes, intrusive thoughts.
And again, all of this is information that's accessible for people to learn how to handle anxiety. But people don't always know where to look or how to get the resources or the support, or to even normalise intrusive thoughts.
I love normalising intrusive thoughts. Someone who's got OCD as well, but they're so common. Everyone gets intrusive thoughts, but for some people, I'm going to go back to the amygdala again and the threat response. For some people, the amygdala decides that intrusive thought has become a threat, and therefore that thought becomes important. Mean nothing, everyone gets them, but because the threat response has hijacked your brain, it's like, what does that mean about me? And my piece of advice for anyone struggling with intrusive thoughts is that they thrive because they're the opposite of who you are. You never get an intrusive thought that's something that you actually want to do.
Your tips that you use, I almost don't like using the word tips when you're a therapist because it's so much more than that. But what tools could you advise now or offer now for anyone who's sat listening with anxiety?
Of course I can. I often get asked, with top tips and things like that. And in social media, it's full of a lot of, here's 5 biohacks. Yes. If you want to get me annoyed, talk about biohacking. Can I factor in my choose you as well into the answer? Because this is what I was saving it for.
Of course you can. I really think it would be useful to just methods, tools to use for people who are struggling.
If you struggle with anxiety, panic attacks, fear of fear itself, intrusive thoughts, uncertainty in your life that you struggle with, maybe ruminate on and it's consuming, my favorite coping technique is actually, it's going to sound cheesy, but you are the coping technique. Don't do what I did to find all the answers externally because they never get the credit for tolerating uncertainty. I tried everything to make the uncertainty go away because I didn't believe that I was strong and capable enough. If you have a panic attack, you don't need anything. It's not hurting you. You are the coping technique. If you start grabbing people and getting outside help and all that, you're just teaching the brain that you can't cope, you need these things. What I like to do is teach people you can tolerate anxiety. And the way out is something that I always bang on about, is the willful tolerance of anxiety. So take it with you. Go into the loud restaurant and let it be loud. It doesn't matter. And the more you do it, the more you teach the brain over time that anxiety isn't important. There's some amazing brain rewiring. The amygdala calms down and stops firing off in Asda when you're trying to, buy your beans and bread. You are the coping technique. I'm not going to tell you to sit and tap. I'm not going to tell you to go and get ice cubes. I'm not going to tell you to say these mantras. And all I'll say is remind yourself that you are the coping technique, and you will get the credit for tolerating that uncertainty, no matter how loud the thoughts are.
But you're absolutely right. We can rewire the brain.
Yeah.
And you show that all the way through your book, Josh. And there's lots of exposure therapy examples, the lift, the driving. It's there. And it's that allowing people to feel they can trust themselves again. And that comes full circle back to what you were saying, is about trusting yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Choosing you.
Yeah, absolutely. Choosing you.
You can get through it.
Yeah. It's you. It's you that's doing it. You have to get the credit.
Yes.
And you are getting the credit. And if you're anxious and listening to this now, you have tolerated all anxiety, all adversity in every moment of your life up until this moment. If you're someone who's very self-critical, like, oh, I'm anxious, not doing stuff, no, the evidence suggests that you've tolerated absolutely everything and you're doing all right. And I'd say go easy on yourself.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. And just even hearing those words, people get that wave of something feels safer inside. Josh, I know that you have, a part of, as well as this book, there's another couple of books you've got out that are specific to anxiety, aren't there?
Yeah. So, and how does that make you feel? You feel like a laugh. That's a stealth help book. So you're reading it, you're laughing, you're being nosy about my life. Some mad stuff in there about my life.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's for everyone to read. If you struggle with panic attacks and really in the midst of anxiety, I recommend my actual self-help books, which aren't funny really. They're just nice, accessible, easy to digest anxiety books for people from the perspective of someone who's been through it and now a therapist.
I'll link those books at the end of this podcast.
Thank you.
But Josh, thank you so much. I can't believe how quickly this conversation has gone. I thought we had ages left. So thank you. It's been really lovely to meet you and a great conversation.
Thank you for having me on. It's so nice. You're a lovely host as well. You're a very calming manner. It's nice. It's the therapist in you, isn't it?